Hey, say hi to everybody. You gonna be good? Hey everyone, Harris O'Malley from DrNerdLove.com, and this is Ask Dr. Nerdlove, where I answer your questions about love, sex, dating, and self-improvement. Now, of course, this only works if I have your cues so I can give my A's. So if you have a short question you'd like to have me answer, share it in the comments. Maybe you will see your question featured on here. This week, I've got 2 subscriber questions. The first comes via email from Caleb, who wants to know, should you tell your date that you're a virgin? So this is a question with layers, because when people ask me something like this, the question that they're asking is not what they actually want to know about. This isn't a question about virginity so much as it is about the anxiety they have around being a virgin, especially if the person asking is older than whatever arbitrary age they've decided was the cutoff point where being a virgin is acceptable. And since I regularly hear from 15-year-olds who think that they're too old to be virgins, that age is really goddamn arbitrary. So, when folks ask me this, the real question they are almost always asking is, will admitting that I'm a virgin mean that my date won't be attracted to me anymore? And the answer to that is maybe. But then again, telling them your favorite pizza topping might do the exact same thing. You can't control for the random things that may or may not turn off your date, and trying to do so will just drive you crazy. All of that having been said, on a more practical level, my general rule is that it is better to err on the side of telling them. First and foremost, the anxiety surrounding male virginity, especially older male virgins, is deeply centered within toxic ideas about masculinity and what makes a real man. The reason why so many people feel anxious about being a virgin, whether by choice or not, is that folks are afraid of what being a virgin says about them as a man. Guys are told over and over again that their value and worth as a man is measured by, among other things, how much sex they've had, and to a certain extent, when they first had it. And like I said in my episode on the virginity paradox, go check it out, guys are taught that losing their virginity is the delineation between being a boy and being a man, and that losing it is supposed to be this epic moment in their life. So if you're a virgin past the age of 15, 20, 30, what have you, then clearly you're just not a real man and there's something wrong with you. And because no woman was willing to sleep with you, then no other woman would ever be willing to sleep with you, because, let's face it, women just don't want to sleep with a man who doesn't know what he's doing. And between you and me, that idea is kind of hilarious if you ever actually talk to women about the guys they date, and just how many of those guys really don't know what the f they're doing. Here's the thing. Being a virgin is fundamentally value neutral. It doesn't mean that you're purer or more virtuous than others, and it doesn't mean that you are somehow deficient, less attractive, less desirable, or less of a man. It's just an experience you haven't had yet for whatever reason. That's one of the reasons why I think it's good to tell your date that you're a virgin. Being willing to just own it without shame, without letting it embarrass you, helps push back against the stigma that real men f*** and that not having had sex is somehow bad. It's a small thing, but refusing to treat being a virgin as a shameful dark secret helps change the culture for the better and makes things better for men in general. It's also going to serve you as a superpower of sorts. How a woman reacts to learning this one thing about you is going to tell you everything that you need to know about her. If she's the sort of person who is going to reject you for being a virgin or has some sort of weird freak out about it, now what you have learned is that she was not right for you, and she was definitely not someone that you would ever want to lose your virginity to. And while, yes, you might have had a chance to sleep with her if you hadn't been honest, someone who's going to have that sort of reaction is someone you don't want to in the first place. If nothing else, that's a pretty good indication that the sex was not going to be that good. Another thing to consider is that being able to share that information makes it easier to communicate with them openly and honestly, which is going to make for a better, stronger relationship overall. Being able to talk with each other about the things that are important to you is crucial to a relationship's success. If you can't talk about yourself, about your history, or about your needs, it's gonna be that much harder to advocate for what you need down the line. And then there's also the fact that being open about being a virgin can clear up potential misunderstandings and let people adjust their expectations or their plans accordingly. To give a somewhat related example from my dating life, there was a woman I met at a bookstore. We had this amazing instant chemistry, and so I asked her out on a date. And that date was awful. Everything was stiff and awkward, and it just seemed like she was really not having a good time, which made no sense considering how well we got on when we first met. Now, this wasn't the most uncomfortable date I have ever been on. That would be the one where I realized I was on a date with a Nazi, but it was definitely in the top 10. But you know what? Hey, you can't win them all. I was willing to chalk this experience up to she just didn't like me. You know what? It happens. And then I got a text from her, and she explained that she had literally never been on a date before, and she was so incredibly nervous about screwing things up that she was basically fighting off a panic attack the entire time. Now, suddenly everything is clicked into place. I could understand why things were so weird on our date, and honestly, I wish she'd told me because I would have pulled out all the stops. I would have made her first date ever something legendary that every other guy she ever went out with was gonna have to measure up to. But hey, you know what? Now I knew the truth, so I asked her out on a second date, which went so much better now that we were able to talk about it openly. We could joke about it. I was able to help her feel much more comfortable, and as a result, we had an amazing time. By that same token, a lot of women would prefer to know that the guy that they're seeing is a virgin, because that's going to change how they behave too. They'd rather know that they're his first so that they know to do things a little differently. And here's the thing, a lot of women aren't just cool with being a guy's first, but are actually turned on by it. And regardless of whether they're turned on by it or not, women would much rather know if someone that they are potentially going to sleep with is a virgin, if only so that they can make sure that losing his virginity is a positive experience. They can't do that if they don't know. And incidentally, I know a lot of guys worry that being a virgin means that they're gonna be lousy in bed. And not only is that not true, but I also have a link to tips on how to have amazing sex, even when it's your first time, in the show notes, so go check that out. Now, with all of this having been said, when is the best time to tell someone, and what's the best way to tell them? Well, if it doesn't come up organically or you haven't had a reason to mention it before, then I'd suggest mentioning it on or around your third date. This gives your date a chance to know you and get comfortable with you, so when you roll this one fact out, it's in the context of who you are as a holistic person. And when you do bring it up, don't roll it out like it's some deep, dark secret or something that you wish you didn't have to tell her. It's a simple, single fact about you. And here's a tip. Most people will look to you for a clue on how to react. So if you treat it like it's no big deal, hey, just so you know, they won't treat it like it's a big deal either. And if they ask why you're still a virgin, just give her a smile and say, well, you just hadn't met the right woman yet. Our second question comes from YouTube, where Maxi Ryu wants to know, what is my take on dating coworkers? So the traditional advice is something along the lines of never dip your pen in the company ink, which is honestly less than helpful. This sort of advice really kind of ignores the realities of life. We spend a lot of our time at work these days, and trying to pretend that the romantic or sexual sides of our lives just shut off when we clock in is absurd. And in this day and age, a lot of our social lives revolve around work as well. Our coworkers are often the people we see the most often. Hell, a lot of times, they're the people we spend the most time with, even in our off hours, and that time spent together increases the odds that eventually sparks are gonna fly. And also, that advice tends to assume that work in this case means a white-collar office job and really ignores things like the service industry, where people tend to date and hook up all the time. Now, I want to predicate that my advice in this case is under the assumption that your company doesn't have a policy forbidding inter-office relationships. Believe it or not, that is something your job can forbid you from in most states. And even if state laws, like in California, prohibit companies from dictating whether you can or can't date your coworkers, your bosses and managers may still have strong opinions on the subject, and if you're in a right-to-work state, you can be fired for that. With that in mind, in general, I'm not opposed to dating coworkers. I just don't think it's a good idea for most people. It can work, but it's gonna be tricky. First of all, there are the obvious answers that can come up, like that it's an incredibly bad idea when there are inherent power differences between the people involved, especially if someone's dating up or down on the org chart, because then there's risks of the appearance of favoritism, impropriety, or coercion, even if everybody involved is 100% consenting. So you would want to date someone who's more or less on the same level as you, just to avoid that particular headache. But the biggest thing you are going to need if you're going to date a coworker is the ability to compartmentalize like a mother. If you're going to date a coworker, then when you're at work, you have to be strictly professional. For one thing, this means no getting together, even just to hang out while you're on the job, no long conversations when you're supposed to be working, no instant message or email chains. If you're at work, you're at work. It also means that you have to be careful to keep your relationship on hold while you're at your job. That means no flirting, no public displays of affection, no cutesy comments for one another. You two may think that it's no big deal, but it may make your other coworkers really uncomfortable, and that could cause them to invoke the magic words, hostile work environment. You also have to be able to keep the various standard relationship pitfalls from following you to the office. If you two work together, you can't let your disagreements or fights affect how you behave with one another when you're on the clock. And by the same token, you really need to leave work at work and keep a very stark line between your personal lives and your work lives. And then there's the fact that while nobody likes to think about it, especially in the early days, there is the question of what are you two going to do if you break up? This all seems like a lot to manage. And that's because it is. Dating a coworker means navigating a lot of complicated issues. It can be worth it, but you're gonna have to be the one to decide if you can do what it takes to make things work without affecting either your job or your relationship in the process. So, that's gonna do it for this episode. Thanks for checking out my video. If you're digging this, let me know in the comments, and if you have a question that you want answered on here, leave that in the comments as well. Who knows, maybe the question I'll answer next time will be yours. And if you need an answer right away, you want a guaranteed response, check out my private coaching options. The priority email service may be exactly what you need. Links are in the show notes, so go check that out. Meanwhile, you can follow me on Twitter at Dr. NERDLOVE. Join NERDLOVE Academy at facebook.com/groups/Dr. NERDLOVE. And as always, hit the logo to subscribe, check out my other videos, and I will see you here next time with more about love, sex, and dating. Thanks for watching.